What a year 2025 was. And I don't know what it was like for you, but for me, it was a crazy year. Very grateful nonetheless. Pregnant for most of it, my first time ever. And it taught me so many valuable lessons, even though it took me away from you for a moment. Well, I'm glad to be back because this episode is not about improving your CV. It's not about the USMLE. It's not about interviews. It's not even about how many programs you ought to apply into. What I want to share with you is something that I've quietly determined is the marker for who moves forward in their IMG journey. And this is based off of years and years and years of coaching. I started coaching IMGs in 2019, officially coaching IMGs within the IMG roadmap in 2019. And I've trained people through interviewing processes, through application reviews. And one thing I'm noticing is we all know the check marks. We all know what bullet points to check off on the list, right? If you go into any AI software, it would tell you exactly what you need to do to prepare for US residency. There's USMLE, there's USCE, LORs, research. We know the list. And so what we've all done as IMGs is we've plunged into hard work and we started working hard and harder and harder to challenge ourselves so that we can prove that we are enough. But I want to walk you through the one thing that I've learned after coaching IMGs who finally match is that there is something else that you need to have in your back pocket when you're going through this process. Something that really makes a difference, something that moves the needle for a lot of IMGs. And it's your mindset. It's how you approach the whole entire process that makes a big difference for you. And you can see this in applications. When they started asking for meaningful experiences as the gateway to determining who you are and what is valuable to you within your ERAS application, I think that should be a marker for all of us as IMGs to begin to realize that how we think through the decisions we're making as medical students, the decisions we're making as residents or future residents, the decisions we're making as physicians in a foreign country, aspiring into US residency, really matter because that is how we're going to be able to have the foundational description of who we are in our meaningfulness, in our application, in our personal statement. The experiences that we're gathering, how are we gathering these experiences? So let me walk you through the mindset shifts that I think you as an IMG needs to have in 2026, especially in this ever-changing system. Okay, if you're ready, grab your matcha, coffee, water, whatever you prefer. Mine is water. All right, let's get right into it. So part one, I want you to differentiate circumstances from reality. Okay. One of the most damaging patterns that a lot of us as IMGs have is confusing circumstances with reality. So circumstances are facts, right? They're the things that we cannot change. For me, I was an IMG from Cameroon. I trained in the Caribbean and I had a visa. And those were my circumstances. However, reality and the stories that I was telling myself was that it meant I was less competitive. It meant I was, programs would want me. It meant that I should be grateful for whatever I get, so I shouldn't aspire too highly. It meant that I told myself competitive specialties were out of reach for me. All right. Many of you know my story. I work in the emergency department right now. But at that time, I didn't even think that emergency medicine was for me. Right. So what we've done is we've taken circumstances, which are scenarios which we cannot change. They are the reality of what we are, such as we're IMGs, non-US IMG, US IMG. We train out the US. So we went to medical school in the Caribbean, we went to medical school in Poland, in Europe, in South America, wherever it may be. Or we have visa limitations. And for non-US IMGs, you don't have that problem, but you know what it was like to have failed the MCAT. You know what it was like to have not been able to get into a US medical school for various reasons, whether that was because of you tried MCAT 3 times or you applied to the US and couldn't get a spot. Or maybe it was that you actually had the opportunity to go here but couldn't secure the financial resources, such as a loan, or didn't have the backup, right, to get into a US medical school. Whatever the circumstances are, they're a fact and they happen. However, how you describe those facts is really what makes a difference for you in this journey. How you embody those facts is what makes a difference for you in this journey. So here's your first truth that I want you to take away from this episode is that circumstances do not predict your outcome. Your interpretation of them is what does. Again, circumstances do not predict your outcome. Your interpretation of your circumstances is what does for you. So instead of denying your circumstances, which I know matched IMGs that I've coached do not do, what we ought to do is we we ought to refuse to allow our circumstances to define the ceiling for us. So we're going to have a more expansive mindset in 2026. We're going to be more open, ask different questions. Instead of figuring out or telling ourselves that we're less competitive, what we're going to do is ask ourselves, what do I ought to do right now to make me a competitive athlete? Instead of saying this specialty, this program is not for me, it's not within the realm of possibility of what's out there for me, we're going to ask ourselves, what does it take to get into this specific type of program? We're going to ask ourselves, for that IMG that got into that specific program, what did it take for them to attain that US residency? So if you notice, what we're doing is we're changing the way we think about our circumstances. We're changing the way we think about our problems, and we're changing our interpretation of them. And instead of doing the rumination and going down the rabbit hole of what we don't have to position ourselves for success, what we're going to do is start making new interpretation. And the first way to make a new interpretation is by asking a different question. If you do not question your thoughts will control you. So you ought to question the thoughts that you have regarding the circumstances of your life. Number two, if it's not already obvious, now you know that your inner dialogue is the beginning of creating a new strategy. So what we just did in the first part of this exercise is I walked you through circumstances. So what I want you to do right now is think about what your circumstances are. What have you defined as the circumstances that make you, you? For me, for Dr. Loom, non-US IMG, visa requiring IMG, low step 1 score, doesn't have support in the United States, is from a foreign country, doesn't know left from right, take family medicine, take IM. Those are the easy specialties. Those are the circumstances that we're being presented with. However, for you, it may be different. You may be non-US IMG or you may be US IMG. Don't have these circumstances that I have, but you have thoughts of imposter, thoughts of being less than, of being not enough. Why? Because you had an MCAT redo, because you couldn't go to US medical school, because you had to retake comp once, twice, 3 times in medical school, because you had to deal with your family members not believing in you and not believing that you going to foreign medical school was going to result in you becoming a physician in the US, because you've heard other people say that because you chose this path, this whole outcome is not possible for you. The outcome here being residency, right? Whatever your scenario is, I want you to stop and pause and think about your inner dialogue, because your inner dialogue is what is producing your result. Whether you believe it or not, when you woke up this morning, there were a few set of circumstances that were true for you. You woke up from a certain particular bed. You went on to do a certain thing, which you had to think about before doing. Before you go to the coffee maker, you thought about, oh, I want a cup of coffee. And then you go get a cup of coffee. Before you run out the door, you thought, oh, I don't want to be late for rotations. And so you're rushing out the door. Your inner dialogue is what is driving every action in your life. Your inner dialogue is just not emotional. It is strategic. So you have to decide now how you filter through your thought. You're going to have to be actively involved in the decisions that you're making. How are you making the decision about the specialty that you chose? Is it the lowest hanging fruit like it was for me? Or just take family medicine because right here it's low hanging fruit? Or is it what you really ought to be doing with your life, filled and surrounded by purpose? Which one is it? How you show up in your interviews, how you show up for your rotation, how you show up for USCE. You want research. How are you reaching out for mentorship? That inner dialogue is what is guiding you. It's what is telling you whether or not you have what it takes. Some of us, it's, I need to be perfect. I need to have more. I need to do more. I shouldn't be too much. I should just be enough. I don't want to be overbearing. I'm already behind. I don't want to seem like I'm not confident. All these thoughts just taking over this place of action. So once you begin to identify what your circumstances are, your next step is to identify the inner dialogue that you have around them. And I've given you some examples there, but sit back right now and think about, knowing my circumstances, what is the inner dialogue that I've chosen for myself? And what I want you to do with that is begin to identify the thoughts that you have around your circumstances. And then you start to realize how you've been maybe potentially limiting yourself or holding yourself back. Because what your inner dialogue has done for you is created limiting beliefs around why your dream to become a radiologist, to become an anesthesiologist, to become an emergency physician, to become a surgeon seems so far away or so impossible. It all boils down to your inner dialogue. And yes, even if you've had a failure, even if you failed a USMLE exam, you failed a comp exam, step 1, step 2, you are so far removed. You're listening to this right now from a whole different country, and it feels like this is such a far dream. Whatever that is, those are all thoughts that come from your inner dialogue. And if you want want to match, if you want to position yourself as an IMG who matches, you have to filter and make a difference between your circumstances and the thoughts that fill up your inner dialogue. And a very easy way is part three. A very easy way to take inventory of how you think is by writing. I like to describe it as expressive writing. Expressive writing is not a new idea. It's, psychotherapists use this in coaching and guiding their counseling, their patients and such. But I want us to use it in a way that helps us academically, right? So what I want you to do, the first thing you're going to do in addressing a change in your mindset, in resetting your mindset for 2026, is you're going to sit down, you're going to grab a pen, okay? And you're going to grab you a little booklet, piece of paper, whatever works. You're going to set a timer for 10 minutes, okay? So you're going to put on your phone a timer for 10 minutes. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to write down this question and you're going to answer it in your expressive writing exercise. What am I most afraid of when it comes to my journey into residency? That is your question. What am I most afraid of when it comes to my journey into residence? So I want you to write that down. You're going to write it out. What am I most afraid of when it comes to my journey into residence? Now that you have it, I want you to open up your mind and I want you to think about those true thoughts that have defined your inner dialogue up until now. All right. So the thoughts around what you've believed about the thoughts around what you've said about yourself regarding past failure, the thoughts about what you said about yourself regarding past rejection, what you assume other people think about you. And I want you to begin to write that down. What are you afraid of? Maybe I'm afraid of failing, right? Maybe I'm afraid of being found out, right? I remember having that thought a lot, being found out. Why? Because I had a disjointed medical career where I started undergraduate in Cameroon, transferred into pre-medicine, got a bachelor's degree given to me in pre-medicine, but I felt like I didn't earn it because I didn't have a clean record of one undergraduate educational pathway. Okay. So I always felt like I was going to get found out, like I was not enough, right? So you're going to write that down. Maybe for you, it's like, I'm afraid I don't have the finances to finish medical school. So financial limitations, right? Maybe for you, it's like, I don't know how I'm going to secure that loan to finish medical school. So loan application, right? For another person is, I don't know if my parents are going to keep supporting me because I keep failing this test, right? So you write that down. For another person, it's like, I have a visa. In fact, I need a visa to even get to the United States. And I'm afraid I will never get it with the current administration. And you write that down. For the next person, it's, I barely could get into a US medical school. And now I'm on this pathway that I'm not even sure about. And I don't know if I'll be able to get into US residence, right? You write that down. What am I most afraid of? And what you begin to do when you take an expressive writing exercise is you open up your mind and you open up yourself to what has been threatening you. That which has been holding you back, you open up your mind to it. You stand in the face of your fear. Because when you begin to address your fear and you begin to call it by name, then you can begin to create the opposite of your fear. Okay? So now, what this exercise does exceptionally well is that it reveals to you what has been holding you back. It reveals to you exactly the strongholds that have been holding you back in your own emotions, in your own thought. It reveals to you the thoughts that have been quietly ruining your life because you can write them down. And so you can prove to yourself that you're no longer afraid of these thoughts. So the first thing you're going to do, you set your timer, you ask yourself that question: what am I most afraid of when it comes to my journey into residency? Because once you can write those down, then you can identify the fear-driven thoughts, the thoughts that have been fueled by fear. And the thoughts that are fueled by fear lead you to where? To avoidance. And the thoughts fueled by fear lead you to avoidance. They eventually lead you to shame, and they lead you to over-explaining, over compensating, and then you end up being an anxious ball that leads you to over preparing and underperforming. So over preparing is not a bad thing. However, when it's fueled by anxiety, when it's fueled by fear and shame, then it just leads to underperformance. Because what you do is you're not showing up 100% like yourself. You're showing up rooted in fear and anxiety, burdened by the tasks and thoughts that are holding you back. And they show themselves in your interactions. They show themselves in your day-to-day, in how you show up to your rotations, how you show up to medical school, how you're showing up even to your job right now that you're planning to quit because you're going to pursue this U.S. residency legacy pathway. Okay. So what we've done here today is I've helped you to process your emotions, to process those emotions that seem to hold you back the most. Because once you can begin to identify and name them, then you can create action steps that help you override those emotions. Because here's the thing, thoughts don't exist in isolation. They produce your emotions. And if you're having negative thoughts, your actions are going to be in the negative. If you have positive thoughts, your actions are going to start producing positive results. Now, the fifth part to this exercise of mindset reset is recognizing self-sabotage. So self-sabotage rarely looks dramatic. It's rarely like, I'm going to sabotage myself, I'm going to ruin my chances. No. For IMGs, it's withholding ourselves from applying to places that we actually truly are qualified for, but we rule ourselves out before other people get to rule us out. It's downplaying our achievements. It's waiting too long to start seeking mentorship. It's staying silent when you should be advocating for yourself from the very beginning, from right now. So self-sabotage is not necessarily a lack of ability. It's a lack of self-permission. You're not giving yourself the permission to have the audacity to dream big, to see yourself beyond just what you've been defined as, beyond what your comp, your USMLE, your MCAT experience, even your journey into medical school. Did you know your journey into medical school is currently defining how you're living your life? Because if you were one that had to deal with strongholds and red flags and all sort of roadblocks, you'll only continue to see those roadblocks even in your current day. Now, once you recognize your inner dialogue and you recognize how it's defining your emotions, and you do an expressive writing exercise to really expose these dark thoughts of the mind, the last thing you're going to do, which is the most important thing and what I can help you the most with, is reframing your mindset. So reframing does not mean you're denying your thoughts. It doesn't mean you're denying your circumstances. Reframing simply means instead of saying, because I'm an IMG, this is hard, this is impossible, it is choosing a new trend of thought. It's saying, I just need a different strategy. Instead of saying, I don't want to be this and I don't want to be that, it's saying, I just need clarity. And having clarity is not arrogance. Having clarity about knowing right now where you should focus your attention in for the next 6 months is what's super important. Having clarity allows you to reframe yourself. It allows you to create mental space so you can actually study in school, do well on your USMLE that you plan for this year, and still make better decisions around where you ought to spend your USCE, your rotations, your research. What type of research you even need to be involved in. You don't need every single research project out here. You don't even need to be a part of things that are paid programs. You could do it all on your own, but you have to be able to reframe so once you reframe your mindset, which is not something you're going to do and just be done with, it's a daily exercise. And it's a daily exercise in challenging your thoughts. It's every time those thoughts come up, you remind yourself and you reframe your narrative and you create a new narrative around these thoughts. So with the expressive exercise, once you write out what you're most afraid of, then the second part to it is you're going to write the opposite of that, and then you're going to take risks. That's the challenge. It's taking risks. So successful IMGs reframe their mindset and then they start taking big risks. Okay. So we want to be confident right off the bat, but confidence doesn't work like that. It just comes from doing and then building courage as we take the next step. So risk looks like owning your story without apology. It looks like advocating for yourself. It looks like believing that you're allowed to have more, that you're allowed reach for the ceiling of what you have told yourself is the ceiling for you. Okay. So in summary, I want you to realize this, and this is from lessons that I have learned coaching IMGs over the years. Number one, the mindset is where success begins. But this is not some kind of whoopla, I don't know, self-help thing I just want you to feel good about yourself with. But what I want you to do is I want you to take this seriously, and I want you to begin to think about the thoughts that you've had around your circumstances. One, you're going to define what your circumstances are, which are just static. They're, what's the word? Inanimate. They're facts. They're just there. But it's your interpretation of your circumstances that's holding you back. So once you can reframe that by identifying your inner dialogue, what you're telling yourself about your circumstances, then you begin to realize where you have held yourself back. And then what you do is you reframe your mindset. And you reframe your mindset very easily, one, by identifying where you have gone wrong and pivoting your thoughts. So instead of having the thought of, because I failed comp, I don't stand a chance. It's okay, how do I need to how do I need to study for comp now moving forward, right? Who do I need to reach out to help me with my comp exam? Who do I need to speak with next regarding my own journey into residence? So as we step into 2026, I want you to remember this. Your mindset is not separate from your strategy. It is the beginning of your strategy. It is not your strategy, but it is the beginning of your strategy. If this episode resonated with you, I want to offer you a calendar to help you stay on point with the actions that you're going to take each month of the year, to position you and give you the permission to think differently about your success in residency for 2026. If you're ready to build not just a strong application, go right now to drninaloom.com/calendar, and I want you to start there with planning out what you're going to do in 2026, because this year you're going to do some things differently, right? And I want you to know exactly what steps to take in order to achieve success. So I want to hear from you, and I want to hear from you by rating this episode, leaving me a comment. You can send me an email at drloom@imgroadmap.com. And I want you to remember this. You are not stuck because you are incapable. You are not stuck because you've been trying to do something complex without the right support. Mindset shifts don't happen in isolation, okay? They happen with guidance, with reflection, with strategy that's tailored to you. And so I want you to know that you have me here as a resource for you this year. If you want to shift and you want to do things that have been, if you want to shift and you want to overcome those roadblocks that have been holding you, this is your chance. Come join me. Bookmark this podcast. Come back to it, because every single week I'll be bringing you resources to help you on your journey into residency. All right. So I'll see you guys in the next episode, where we'll be talking about visas, specifically going from a visa to a green card as an IM. Can't wait to share that with you.